IDW Sonic Comic Issue 36. Shadow's not interested in trying to stop the avalanche, apparently. Even though you think he could use Chaos Control to teleport it away easily. But it was smarter of him to agree to save Tails and Rouge since he knows Sonic could go stop it without him with a super speed. At least I assume he knows. It was immediately common sense for Sonic to say they should split up, because there's two people there with the same speed powers. Shadow then wants to go straight to Starline without untying Tails first. Though he figures Starline would attack him if he did that. Though he could warp Tails to safety first, so he wouldn't need to untie him. If Shadow hates him so much, why is he wasting time listening to Starline talk and talking to him? He kicked Clutch immediately. He has more reason to hate Starline. Logically, he'd just do the same to Starline and beat him up. So it'd be really forced if he got brainwashed by him instead, because he has plenty of time to avoid that. Conveniently, Rouge reveals she was able to escape the ropes on her own, and tells Tails to start cutting the ropes like she did. There's a reason I didn't remember this happening, and was surprised by it all over again when I started reading out the script. This makes no sense. She should have explained that she had a knife in her jacket that she could reach with tied up hands the whole time. Sure is convenient that she could reach it. She tells Omega a code word, which is a smart way of making sure the villain won't know what her plan is. And he starts auditory interference, as apparently he's competent enough to do that as a head. And Starline ends up falling, but he uses some magical artifacts he must have gotten to save himself. It's always good for a villain to be competent. I guess he conveniently found them in ancient ruins and Eggman didn't in all those years. You'd think the planet would be out of those by now. Rouge puts her hand on Shadow's shoulder, and I wonder how General could possibly be hurting himself when fighting robots, when all of these robots die in one hit and have no chance of hitting you in the games. Unless you ram into them because you can't see them coming. Cream asks the Chow in the cage to fight for them after getting out. And then being able to hurt Badniks only makes sense because Cheese can hurt Badniks when he's thrown at them, but that's after he's thrown at them. You'd think a Chow's fist would be really soft, not something that could damage a Badnik. The Badniks must be made out of the weakest materials ever. Bell lets them out as the heroes start failing, with Amy being distracted by Gemma getting tripped by a laser. Cream fortunately is able to help Gemma up, and he thanks her as they hold hands. Amy smacks the robot's head and jumps off it, and Cream compliments all of them. Tails tells them all to grab the E100 series parts quick because people need saving. Shadow shows up to help Sonic to repay him for Sunset City, even though Sonic didn't do anything to help him in Sunset City. It's polite of Sonic to not question that, but you'd think he'd be confused in a thought bubble. He should have said, "Thanks for turning me back to normal." He spin dashes through the trees with Shadow, and fortunately complains that it's a shame they had to cut down the trees. And the avalanche isn't stopped by them after Shadow thought it was a good idea. I would figure the thing that's impressive about him being an ultimate life form, other than him not being able to get sick, which even then never comes up, it's not like his friends all get sick and he doesn't. The main thing that's great about him being an ultimate life form is that he can use Chaos Control, so if he's so proud of it, why doesn't he use Chaos Control? When told about the avalanche, Omochao says there's an official warning system in place, but doesn't believe the heroes because it didn't go off somehow, despite the avalanche. And Amy says she'll make some new exits with her hammer if Omochao doesn't get the people to the exits. Did we really need to read about Omochao being reluctant to trust the heroes and save the people? I didn't think he could get any worse. Why does Omega need to give these people any encouragement to leave? Why does Starline think he can get them to hand over Tails? If he can brainwash people, why doesn't he brainwash everyone in front of him and be done with it? I guess he can only do so one at a time, conveniently for them. So Amy smacks his head with a hammer, without it seeing it impact him. And Starline summons a force field to protect himself, which Amy breaks. Then he activates a blue force field and flies towards Tails to grab his tail. Why didn't he do this in the first place? Padding. Then he stops having the advantage for some reason, and Belle says, my... Tails pulls her rope-like tail, so Belle ends up kicking Starline away. Starline naturally complains about this coming out of nowhere, and I'm guessing he'll survive the avalanche by simply summoning a force field again, even though it breaks from Amy's hammer in just a few hits. Or he could have made himself blue and ran away. It's surprisingly competent of the builders to have designed the chateau to withstand an avalanche. Sonic and Shadow spin dash out of the snow to reunite with Rouge, who happens to say darned instead of damned, even though she's already a jewel thief. So she doesn't give a shit. Amy hugs Sonic, who asks if everyone's alright, and Sonic's impressed by what Belle did to help, and thanks her and apologizes for being too tough on her before. Him being too tough on AI has been done before though, because in Archie, Sonic was tough on Nicole. Tails asks her to help him in his workshop because apparently he thinks a genius like him could use some help in it right away. At least that takes advantage of him being more humble than Eggman. It's pretty convenient for her. It makes sense that he'd want to do his job faster. Conveniently for them, they did find some Gamma robot parts, so they could give Omega the exact same design he had earlier, because getting him a new design the slightest bit would risk scaring fans to get mad too easily. So apparently it's better to bore us instead. Well, I do like Omega's design, but him being repaired by Tails to have the exact same design wasn't what was foreshadowed, and it was so convenient. So there's a reason I didn't expect it. It's so reckless of Tails to tell Omega to spar with General just to test out whether he's fully fixed. He shouldn't need to tell Tails that General wouldn't be okay after that. Tails is supposed to be smart. Vanilla holds Cream's hand, and at least her recapping to Vanilla being blocked by the other characters' heads tells us that we don't have to read anything she's saying. So it spares us the recap. It turns out Cream brought all those chow to her house. How would Vanilla be able to afford feeding all of them? It should be explained that since Cream's able to communicate with Cheese, she's going to communicate with the Chow to figure out who all of their original owners are. So she'll be able to get the Chow back to their original owners. That should be referenced to have Cream do a good thing. Good thing Cream has a swing set out there. And lucky for Sonic, the Dark Chow doesn't hate him and want to bite him constantly, when even Razor's Chow was like that. It's confusing to change the rules from the reboot to IDW because both of them have the games as part of their past. Sonic tells Shadow he's glad he helped as Shadow's holding an apple, which at least shows one of the things he likes to eat. Belle sweeps with a broom, saying that it's nice to be helping out. I'm still suspicious that she's going to be used as a surprise villain later just because she's a robot that they conveniently met in Eggman's base. Which makes me wonder if it means something, because why would she be searching for her dad in a place like that? She could have been lying and just trying to lull them into a false sense of security. The easiest way to retcon a character is to claim that they were lying. She says she's missed fixing problems. Tails says this whole time she's been easily reading these blueprints, and he needed a cipher for Omega to be fixed. The only person in the world who was supposed to be able to read this is Eggman, or at least something he created. He says that he's not mad at Belle, he just wishes that she had been honest with him. It's less creative to have Eggman actually be her creator. There's been so much foreshadowing to this. When you have too much foreshadowing to something, it makes some people expect there to be a different revelation than what's being built up to, because the predictable revelation would be too obvious. It would kind of defeat the point of having a mystery if it doesn't subvert the audience's expectations. He didn't have a reason to make her in the Metal Virus arc, and he didn't have a reason to know about his crazy coding, and therefore make Belle a cipher for it when he was Mr. Tinker. It also makes less logical sense for Eggman to be her creator, because since when does he make wooden robots that have free will and are good? She says Eggman didn't create her, but doesn't explain who did, so Tails sighs and drops it. Why is she so ashamed of her master that she won't tell him who it is if it's not Eggman? It sure would be interesting if it wasn't Eggman, and it was someone else that she was ashamed of instead. Then we see Starline in a bathrobe that humanizes him, and I guess Starline's her creator then. I mean, that would also be interesting, although it wouldn't make sense that she's good when he created her. It would have been interesting if it was explained that he used to be good and he made her when he was good. Starline realistically complains that it'll take weeks to get his build back to normal, as there's a band-aid on it, and his perm was ruined. So, how did he survive? Hello? He says it wasn't all for nothing as he's holding a vial with something in it. And the complete specimen would have been ideal, but he still got what he needed. Why does it matter how much DNA he gets? What's the difference if he doesn't get a complete specimen? Since they made a point of showing him holding Tails' tail, I'm guessing he got Tails' fur and is going to make a clone bot of him. Like an infiltrator robot. Or a clone. So we'll basically get to see the concept of an evil Tails working for an evil engineer that wants to take over the world. It's weird that it took this long. If Starline made Belle, why the hell did he let her have free will? Why did he program her to be a good person? So that would bring up plot holes. He'd have to make her that way intentionally. Why would she have a history of fixing problems and want to go back to that if she was made by someone evil? This issue by Evan Stanley was about Omega getting fixed with gamma parts after Belle unlocks a cage of Chow so they can charge at the robots of clutches. Starline gets a specimen after grabbing Tails' tail flying at him and getting kicked by Belle. Why didn't he do that right away instead of talking so much? If all he did this for was to try to kidnap Tails, and he could brainwash Rouge effortlessly without her resisting, why didn't he simply go to Tails' bed in the middle of the night and brainwash him? That's a storybreaker power. Couldn't he just send a robot to kidnap Tails instead of sending Rouge? I guess making a robot would take too long, but couldn't he send an egg pawn? He could have had a robot shapeshift to look like Rouge. He studied robotics, he'd know how to make robots. And he had Tails right there in a roller coaster ride. Why didn't he brainwash him into being his sidekick the minute he woke up? It should have been shown that he was trying to do that, and Rouge was talking too much, so he couldn't focus on Starline. At least it was impressive that the Chateau could perfectly withstand an avalanche.